Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Right. In Masechta Middos, Perek Aleph, and we're talking about the Sha'orim into the Azora. If you take a look at diagram number 3, okay, diagram number 3. Again, this is the Ezras Noshim. We're not talking about that today. When we say the word Azora, it does not include this square, which is Ezras Noshim. The Azora begins at the Shar Nicanor in the east. You ascend 15 steps, you're in Shar Nicanor, and then you enter what's called the Azora, this structure. Inside the Azora, you have the Ulam, the rectangular structure, and the Heichal, which has in it the Kodesh, and behind a partition, the Kodesh Kadoshim. In the Kodesh, you have the Shulchan Menorah and the Mizbeach HaKtores. Behind the partition, you have the Oron. And now we're dealing with the gates, the openings into the Azora. So make believe this bottom part of the picture doesn't exist, and we're only dealing with this part of the picture. And we're looking at the entranceways into the Azora. We dealt with the southern wall, the southern 3 entry points, and we started dealing with the northern 3 entry points. And we're up to the last entry point, and that's Mishnah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Hey, page 22 in the Masechta Middos, Shebat Tzafon, on the northern wall. And now I'm going to diagram number 5. Although I have a question about diagram number 5, which we don't need to go into, but diagram number 5 shows you 3 entryways into the Azora from the northern wall. The Mishnah says, Shabbat Tzafon, Shar Hanitzutz. If you're on the northern wall, you have the Shar Hanitzutz right there. Right. It's northwest. Okay. And then you have the second one is Shar HaKorban, and the third one is the Beis Hamoked. And that's what we're going to be dealing with today. This entry point, which is called Beis Hamoked, the one that has the dome on it. The Beis Hamoked is a very large room inside of it. And from there, you were able to enter into the Azora. Now we're going to Mishnah Vav, which is where we were up to yesterday, page 25. I wanted to show you diagram 6, which everyone should have. You can look at it this way. You entered the east, you went through the Ezras Noshim, Shar Nicanor. This is that structure, okay, that has the Ulam, the Kodesh, and the Kodesh Kadoshim, etc. This is the northern wall, not of the Harabayas. The northern wall of the Harabayas is this light-colored line here. This dark line is the northern wall of the Azora. And this is the place we're talking about right now, this huge room, which is called the Beis Hamoked. You can enter from the Harabayas, you can walk, if you're permitted to, again, if you're permitted to, you can walk into the Beis Hamoked. And then you walk through the Beis Hamoked, there's another door on the other side of the Beis Hamoked where you can walk right into the Azora. So the Beis Hamoked has a door that goes from Harabayas into Beis Hamoked, from Beis Hamoked into the Azora. But you notice, please, how the structure is built. Part of this structure is outside the Azora, and part of this structure is inside the Azora. Okay. This is the dark black line here, is the wall of the Azora. And this room, the Beis Hamoked, part of it is outside this wall, and part of it is inside the wall. The part of it that is outside the wall has the Kedusha of Har Habayis. This is Har Habayis territory. The part of this room, the Beis Hamoked, that's inside this wall, has Azara Kedusha. And we know what we've learned about the big differences between Har Habayis Kedusha and Azara Kedusha. When we talked about the Kohanim and the Leviim guarding the Beis HaMikdash, we said that it is permitted to sit on the Har Habayis, but it is not permitted to sit in the Azara unless you're a scion of the Davidic dynasty. So if you were in this side of the Azara, the northern side of the Beis Hamoked, you're allowed to sit. In the very same room, if you went towards the southern side of the Beis Hamoked, beyond this line, you are now in Azara territory, and you could not sit. Another distinction, Kodesh Kadoshim, the elevated Karbonos, it's not a very good word, but the higher Kedusha Karbonos, like a Chatas and an Asham. The Kohanim ate that. They were only allowed to eat that in the Azara. Kodshim Kalim can be eaten in the whole city of Yerushalayim. A Korban Pesach is Kodshim Kalim. It could be eaten anywhere inside the whole city of Yerushalayim, not just the Har Habayis, inside the wall of Yerushalayim. But Kodesh Kadoshim had to be eaten in the Azara. So if a Kohen wanted to eat part of a korban chatas, and he was in the Beis Hamoked, he's allowed to eat that korban chatas on the southern part of the Beis Hamoked because that's in the Azara. He was not allowed to eat the korban chatas on the northern part of the room because that's Har Habayis, and you're not allowed to eat kachim kadochim on the Har Habayis. You have to eat it in the Azara. So this is a very interesting room. It's not the only one that way, we'll see, but it's a very interesting room in the sense that it was built partially out of the wall of the Azara, and therefore it's Har Habayis Kedusha, and partially inside the wall of the Azara, and therefore it has Azara Kedusha. Now this room had 4 separate rooms in it. Each of the 4 corners of the room had another room in it, which is the discussion of our Mishnah today. Now that means that the 2 rooms that are on the northern side of the Beis Hamoked are on Har Habayis territory, and they only have Har Habayis Kedusha. The 2 rooms that are on the southern corners of the Beis Hamoked have Azara Kedusha, a higher level Kedusha. So now the Mishnah is going to describe for us which rooms were where. If you want to get a different view, you go to diagram 7, and that's a view of the inside of the Beis Hamoked. We're going to eventually get to these steps. Okay, the Beis Hamikdash was built on an incline. It went higher and higher. We'll get to these steps. But if you went into the Beis Hamoked, you see it says on the diagram, Kodesh and Chol. The Kodesh means it's on the Azara side. And that means it's the southern part of the Beis Hamoked. The Chol is the northern side of the Beis Hamoked, and the picture shows you 4 little rooms in the corners. And now we're going to discuss the 4 rooms. Mishnah Vav, page Chavtes. Before I forget, probably about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, Rabbi Samit sent me a link of a virtual tour of the Beis Hamikdash. It's not the tour the virtual reality tour that you can go to the music museum in Yerushalayim and see with those special binoculars on your eyes. It's a completely different tour, and it's free now. There's a special code, and you can watch a virtual tour of the Beis Hamikdash. My son-in-law reminded me yesterday about this tour, and I actually began taking the tour yesterday. I'm going to have Shmuel Blineda send out the link with the code. It allows you to do this for free. And we've learned enough of Masechta Middos that you'll have a smile on your face as you watch this video, because you're going to understand everything about the virtual tour. You're going to understand the Eastern Gate, the Northern Gate, the Southern Gate, the Western Gate. You can understand all the names. You can understand where you're going through, etc. We've done enough Masechta Middos that you'll have a real appreciation for this video. We'll send out Blineder the link. So we thank Rabbi Samet for bringing that to our attention. So the Mishnah, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Vav says, "V'arba l'shakas hoy b'beis hamoked." There were 4 separate rooms inside this Beis Hamoked. Again, the Beis Hamoked is on the northern wall of the Azorah, and it has 4 rooms inside it, kikitonos psuchas l'traken, like small rooms going into a palace. Shtayim b'kodesh, 2 of these rooms are in Kodesh. They are in the Azorah, which means the 2 southern rooms in the Beis Hamoked. Again, the Beis Hamoked is on the northern wall of the Beis Hamikdash. Diagram 6. Tzafon, the northern wall. On the northern wall, we have this huge room, Beis Hamoked. There's going to be a room northeast, a room northwest, a room southwest, and a room southeast. The 2 rooms, southeast and southwest, are in the Azorah and are Kodesh. The 2 rooms that are to the north, northwest, northeast are in the Har Habayis, and the Mishnah calls that Chol. Just comparatively, it's Chol. For Roshei Pispasin Mavdilim Ben Kodesh L'Chol. And they made these, according to the diagram that we saw yesterday, they made like out of some material, probably rock, they made fists. And they put the fists, if you look at diagram 7, across the wall on the northern part of the Beis Hamoked. That indicated to you, so long as you were in the space that had the fists on the wall, you were in the whole part. If you kept on walking and there was no fist, you're now in the Azorah part. And this was very important to know, as we mentioned. If you're in the place that has the fists on the wall, you can sit down. If you move further in towards the south and there are no fists on the wall, you can't sit. You're now in the Azorah. If you're a Kohen who wants to eat a korban chatas, if there are no fists on the wall, you're in the Azorah. You can eat the korban chatas. If you move further out and you see fists on the wall, you can't eat the korban there, because now you're in the Har Habayis. So the Mishnah says these fists were on the wall, so you knew in the Beis Hamoked, am I in the Azorah or am I on the Har Habayis? Umer hayu meshamshos. What was the use of these 4 rooms? Ma'aravis deromis. Let's go back to picture diagram number 6. And the first room that the Mishnah wants to talk about is Ma'aravis deromis. Okay. Ma'aravis deromis means we're dealing with the west, the southwest wall. Now, the 2 rooms on the south are in are in the Azorah. They are Kodesh. The southwest wall, the Mishnah says, Ma'aravis deromis hi hoisa lishkas teloi korban. That was the room in which they kept the karbonis, the animals that were fit to be brought as karbonis. A minimum of 6 animals were kept here all the time. We know that animals had to be inspected to make sure they didn't have a halachic blemish, a halachic mum. A minimum of 6 animals were kept in this southwest room. And that southwest room is, as you can see, in the Azorah part. So it's a Kodesh room. And that's called Lishkas Teloi Korban. Deromis Mizrachis, again, we're in the south, but it's the southeastern room. right here. And again, it's a Kodesh room. That was the room in which the Lechem Haponim was made. The Lechem Haponim was made every Erev Shabbos, and it was brought into the Kodesh, into here, where the Shulchan was, and on Shabbos afternoon, they took off the Lechem Haponim of the previous week. They gave it out to the Kohanim to eat, and they put on the Shulchan the new bread that was baked the day before Friday. So that's the room of the Lishkas Osei Lechem Haponim. It is southeast. It's in the Azora area. We know the Lechem Haponim had a tremendous miracle. Silukai Kisidurai, when they took the Lechem Haponim off of the Shulchan to give it to the Kohanim to eat Shabbos afternoon, it had smoke rising from it. It would look like, and it was like, it just came out of the oven. Silukai Kisidurai. How old was this bread? 9 days old. It was baked on a Friday, and it wasn't eaten till the following Shabbos. So the bread had been outside the oven for 9 days, and it was still fresh, so that even smoke was coming off the bread. This was a miracle in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash. And of course, we know that there's nothing that is a coincidence. So in this week's parasha, at the end of the parasha, we have the unfortunate incident of the Mavorech Hashem. Someone, to use a euphemistic term, somebody blessed God. He was a Ben Ish Mitzri, and he was very upset about something. And Rashi discusses what he was upset about. He was upset about something, but what did he start making fun of? What did he insult? The parasha of the Lechem Haponim is this week's parasha. At the end of Parashas Emor, the Torah discusses the Lechem Haponim. There were 12 breads that were put on the Shulchan and were made there the whole week, and they were eaten 9 days later. And Rashi tells us that the Ben Ish Yisraelis, Ru Ben Ish Mitzri, who blessed God, this parsha is right after the parsha of Lechem Haponim. And he said, this is silly. Derech melech lechol paschama b'chol yom shema pas sonene shel tisha yomim pitniya. He said, this is ridiculous. The Mishkan, in those days the Mishkan, and likewise the Beis Hamikdash, is God's palace. Why are we putting 9-day-old bread in front of the Kohanim to eat from God's palace? A king gets fresh bread every day. Why is this place, which is supposed to be a palace, serving up 9-day-old bread? And from there, he began to have other complaints. But the Lechem Haponim is in this week's parsha, and this question that was raised is in this week's parsha. But to that, the Gemara tells us, we learn out of a pasuk in Sefer Shmuel, Silukai Kisidura. It was a special miracle. The Lechem Haponim was baked on Friday, and it wasn't put on the Shulchan. The Shulchan had last week's bread on it. Shabbos, the next day in the afternoon, the lechem that was on the Shulchan was given out. The new lechem that was baked Friday was put on it, and that lechem waited until next Shabbos to be eaten. And it was 9-day-old bread, but it was fresh as it came out of the oven, and smoke would rise from it. That's the Lechem Haponim. This Lechem Haponim was made in the southeastern room of the Beis Hamoked, and it's inside the Azora, so it's a Kodesh room. Next room, Mizrachis Tzefonis. Now we're moving on to the two northern rooms. And the two northern rooms are outside the wall of the Azorah, so they're chol rooms. Mizrachis Tevunos, northeast, Ba Gonzu B'nei Chashmonai, we're now page 26 of the handout for Middos, as Avnei HaMizbeach, Sheshiktzum Malchei Yavon. Mizrachis Tevunos, northeast, okay, we're the Beis HaMoked, and we're now north, which means we're outside the Azorah part of the Beis HaMoked. We're now in the Har HaBayis part. The northeast room is the place, here the Mishnah calls it, doesn't give it a name, but it's called the Lishkas HaChotamot. And in this room, they put, in that northeastern room, they put the stones of the Mizbeach that they had to take apart. We know that the Syrian Greeks dominated Eretz Yisrael during the period of the second Beis Hamikdash. And we know about the miracle of Hanukkah. We know what they did inside the second Beis Hamikdash. They defiled the Beis Hamikdash, and they brought Karbonis la'avodah zarah, unfortunately, on the Mizbeach. When the Hashmonaim were victorious over the Yevonim, they took over the Beis Hamikdash again, and they had to take apart the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach couldn't be used for halachic reasons because avodah zarah korbanos were brought on it. They took apart that Mizbeach, and they put the stones of that Mizbeach inside this northeast room of the Beis HaMoked. And so the Mishnah says, Mizrachis Tevunos, northeast, Ba Gonzu B'nei Chashmonai, the Chashmonaim hid, Es Avnei HaMizbeach, the stones of the Mizbeach, Sheshiktzum Malchei Yavon, that the Malchei Yavon had defiled. They didn't throw them out, they put them in this room, northeast in the Beis HaMoked. And they had to build a new Mizbeach. And when was the new Mizbeach built? And when was it finished? And when did they start using that new Mizbeach? 25 Kislev, the day of Hanukkah. So that's where the old stones were placed, northeast, and there was something else going on in that northeastern room, and that's why it was called Lishkas HaChotamot, the room where you purchased seals. It was where you got receipts. A person that wanted to bring a carbon, or he wanted to bring a mincha, he would purchase flour, the wine, the oil, whatever was necessary for his carbon or his mincha, he would purchase that, and he would get a receipt or a seal inside this room, and then he'd be able to go and get the oil, wine, flour, whatever it is that he was bringing. He would then be able to have proof that he's paid for it. So this was called the room that had the stones of the Mizbeach that the Yevonim defiled, was called Lishkas HaChotamot. And now we have one more room. Tzfonis Marovis. We're still in the north, and now we're in northwest. And this northwest room, the Mishnah says, Bo Yordim L'Beis HaTefillah. You went in this room, and there was a stairway. There was a staircase that went down, because there was plenty of room under the Beis HaMikdash. As we said, and we're going to learn more about that, the Beis HaMikdash went on an incline. It went higher and higher. You went into the Ezras Nashim, for example, and we learned about diagram number 3. A person went into the Ezras Nashim. He had to go up 15 stairs to get into the Azorah, which means that the Beis HaMikdash is built this way. You're walking up, 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 up. You walk on the Har HaBayis, you had to walk up to get into the Ezras Nashim. You're in this Ezras Nashim, you had to walk up 15 steps to get into the Azorah. You went into the Azorah over here before you got into the Ulam, the rectangular building, you had to walk up 12 more steps. So Beis HaMikdash is built on an incline, it's going higher and higher. So therefore, underneath the Beis HaMikdash itself, there were rooms. The Beis Hamikdash is not sitting on a flat plane. It's moving up and up. And as it's moving up and up, there's space underneath what's built above. And one of the things, there were many tunnels under the Beis Hamikdash. And in this, going back to diagram 6, in this northeastern room of the Beis Hamoked, which you can see is in the Beit Harabayis area, there was a staircase that went down to a mikveh that the Kohanim would use if they needed to go to the mikveh. Bar Yardim Lebeis Hatfilah. So in summary, there are 3 entryways on the southern wall of the Azara, 3 entryways on the northern wall of the Azara. Today we focused in on the Beis Hamoked. The Beis Hamoked was a large room. The northern part of the room was on Har HaBayis. The southern part of the room was in the Azara. The southern part had 2 rooms in the corners. The northern part had 2 rooms in the corners. The southwest wall, the southwest room, is where they had 6 animals, minimum 6 animals that were inspected for karbonis. The southeast room was where they made lechem aponim. The north, moving out to the north, which is outside the Azara. The northeast room was where they put the stones that the Yevonim from the Mizbech that the Yevonim had defiled in the second Beis Hamikdash. It was also called Lishkas Achot Hamot. And in the northwest room, that's where there was a mikveh. There was a room. In the room, there was a staircase. You went downstairs to a mikveh. Mishnah Zayin. Shnayim Sha'orim, again, we're on page 26 of the handouts. The numbers are not exact, but where the number that is on top of the page that was scanned should be page 26. We're still looking at diagram 6, and the Mishnah says, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Zayin, Shnayim Sha'orim Hoyu LeBeis Hamoked. The Beis Hamoked had 2 doors. We just learned about them. There's a door from the Har HaBayis into Beis Hamoked, and there's a door from Beis Hamoked into the Azara. Shnei Sha'orim Hoyu LeBeis Hamoked. Echad Pasuach Lachel. One is opened into the Chel. We'll discuss the Chel in a minute again to explain it. This is the doorway here that's towards the Har HaBayis. Ve'echad Pasuach LaZara. And another door on the Beis Hamoked goes into the Azara. So basically, one door leaves the Beis Hamikdash, and one door enters the Beis Hamikdash. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, Zeh she'oya pasuach la'azara, this doorway, it had a door on it. This doorway that was opened into the Beis Hamikdash, into the Azara, pishpesh kotan hayalo. It had a small door in the big door. In other words, there's a big door, and you can open that big door. Huge door. We'll learn about the measurements of the doors in the next parak. But in this door, they built a smaller door, and you can open just the small door. So it's a door in a door. The small door is part of the big door, and you were able to open the small door without opening the whole big door. And Rabbi Yehuda said, Zeh shehoya pasuach la'azara, the door that opened into the Azara, pishpesh koton hayalo, it had a small door inside it. Shebo nichnasim livlosh es ha'azara. That's the small door that was used every morning. We'll learn more about that. That's the small door that was used every single morning when the Kohanim started, when they were ready to start the Avod, the Kohanim would go in there and inspect livlosh, a balash, a spy or an investigator. They went into livlosh es ha'azara. They went in to inspect the Azara. Before the Avoda began, they made sure that everything was in its place. There should be no interruptions in the Avoda. The Kohanim needed all kinds of kalim to do the avoda, and they made sure everything was in its place, rather than start the avoda and then someone say, oh, I don't have a knife, I don't have a cup, I don't have a this. So every morning they made sure that all the kalim were in their appropriate places so that the avoda can proceed accordingly. And that little door, in the large door, in the Beis Hamoked going into the Azara, that little door was where they went through to do the inspection every single morning. Let's now go to Mishnah Ches and begin the discussion of Mishnah Ches, which we'll pick up on tomorrow. Beis Hamoked Kippah. Beis Hamoked, if you go back to Mishnah, go back to diagram 5, it has a kippah on top of it, a dome. It's this huge room that we just discussed with 4 rooms in it, and it has a kippah. It has a dome on top of it. Ubayis Godol Hoya. And it was a very large room. Mukaf Rovdim Shel Even. And it had around it, we'll get a better picture of this tomorrow. I just want to begin the Mishnah. Yes, I see there's a message on the board. I do not have Mishnah 8, that is possible. Okay, we'll just read it quickly for today and we'll send it out if we haven't already tomorrow. Bayis Godol Hoya Mukaf Rovdim Shel Even. Around it, around the inside of the Beis Hamoked that we were just talking about, they put, it looked like steps. And the purpose of the steps are, the Mishnah says, Ziknei Beis Av Yisheinim Sham. The older Kohanim of the Beis Av, remember we talked about the family of Kohanim is broken into 24. And there was a 24-week rotation. Week 1, this certain family. Week 2, the next family. 25 weeks later, the first family came back. Now each family, each mishmar, is then broken into a Beis Av. So you have the week number 1 family. Week number 1 family is now broken up into 6. Rashi seems to indicate in one place 7. Broken into 6 separate divisions. So each family has now 6 separate divisions. Each division is responsible for 1 day of the week. Division 1 is responsible for the Avod in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Rishon. Division 2 is responsible for Avod in the Beis Hamikdash Yom Sheni, etc. for 6 days. On the 7th day Shabbos, it appears that they all got together and worked in the Beis Hamikdash, according to most Mefarshim. So the Beis Av, the people who are going to do the Avod in the Beis Hamikdash the next day, so today is Monday. If your Beis Av was scheduled to do the Avoda Tuesday, tomorrow morning, you would have to be in the Beis Hamoked Monday night so that you'd be ready Tuesday morning to go into the Azara. Remember, the Beis Hamoked had an opening into the Azara. You had to be ready to go into the Azara and start the morning, Tuesday morning with the Avoda. And you would sleep on these steps. There were protrusions out of the wall. You would sleep there. V'ziknei Beis Av Yisheinim Sham. U'maftachos ha'azara biyadam. They had the keys to the Azara. These elders of this Beis Av, this division that was going to work on Tuesday, they had possession for that day of the keys to the Azara. Upirchei kahuna ish kisto ba'aretz. And the Pirchei kahuna, the younger Kohanim who were in the Beis Av, did not sleep on these beds, so to speak, these protrusions from the walls where the elders would sleep on. That was for the older people. The older people slept on these type of beds. The younger people, the younger Kohanim of that division, they would sleep on the floor. And it was ish kisto biyado. He would have like a pillow. That's all they had. And they slept on the floor, the young folks of that division. And that, again, is occurring in the Beis Hamoked. The Beis Hamoked, as we saw, has an entrance right into the Azara. And in there, they had these protrusions coming out of the wall. the elders of the division who were going to do the avodah the next day would sleep on these protrusions, and the young people of that division would be sleeping on the floor with a pillow. And B'li Neder, I'll check my records. If we haven't sent out Mishnah Ches yet, I'll B'li Neder send it out later today for Shmuel to distribute. We're going to take a look tomorrow at Mishnah Tes. What I want to take a look at today is what we mentioned before, the Chayil. And we talked about this already. We're going to take a look, B'li Neder, at the Rambam tomorrow, who explains to us how these different parts of the Beis HaMikdash had different levels of holiness. This picture does not have Har HaBayis on it, so I'm going to make believe that where my finger is Har HaBayis. It is outside the walls of Azorah. So a person standing right here is on the Har HaBayis. He then walked to this area. And this area, before he gets into the Ezras Noshim, this area is called the Chayil. Around the Chayil, there's this thin black line. That black line is the Soreg. I believe Shmuel sent out, courtesy of Atara and Meir Beck, who found it. I had mentioned that there were signs in foreign languages right here on this outer thin wall that said, Goyim may not proceed any further. A Goy was allowed to go on the Har HaBayis under certain conditions. He couldn't go past this thin wall, which is called the Soreg. And there were signs there that said Gentiles cannot go past this wall. And there are pictures of their stones that have these inscriptions on it in museums. And again, courtesy of Meir and Atara Beck, you have a link that you can actually see one of these signs. So this is the Soreg. When you entered the Soreg, you entered an area that's called the Chayil. And that's 10 amos wide, 22 or 23 feet. It's 22 or 23 feet wide. And then you got to the thick wall, which is the wall of the Ezras Noshim, or the wall of the Azorah. So this light-colored area around the Azorah is called the Chayil. The partition to the Chayil, this thin black wall here, is called the Soreg. It separated Har HaBayis from the wall of the Azorah. So now you've entered, you're going to Yerushalayim, you walked into Yerushalayim, you walked through wall 1. You kept on walking, and you got to the wall of the Har HaBayis, wall 2. You kept on walking, you got to the small, thin wall called Soreg, 3rd wall. You kept on walking, you came to the wall of the Ezras Noshim, the 4th wall. You kept on walking up the 15 steps of the Shar Nicanor, and you came to the wall of the Azorah. So if you're going to go as a Yisrael to bring a korban, the most usual path you would use is going to Shar Nicanor. You can see in the diagram right inside Shar Nicanor, you have Shar Ezras Yisrael. That's where a Yisrael can stand. So if you were making that trip from Hera B'Yameinu, you would get to Yerushalayim, enter the wall of Yerushalayim, wall 1. You would enter the Har HaBayis, assuming from the east, Shushan Habira. Remember the gate on the east of the Har HaBayis, the Shushan Habira. So you went through 2 gates. You walked now on the Har HaBayis to this little wall called the Soreg. You entered the Soreg, that's wall 3. There's a wall for the Ezras Noshim. You entered that, that's wall 4. You came to Shar Nicanor, you came to the steps, ascended 15 steps, you came to the wall of the Azorah now, and you went in through the 5th wall. Shar Chomas Yerushalayim 1. Shar Harabayas 2, the wall of the Chel 3, the wall of Shar of the city Yerushalayim, Shar of the Harabayas, opening of the Chel, opening of the wall of the Ezras Nashim, and opening of Nicanor. So you're actually going through 5 Sha'arim to get to the Ezras Yisrael. Okay. As I mentioned, Bli Neder will finish this week Perek Aleph from Masechta Middos. I'll ask Shmuel to please send out the link for this virtual tour. And now that we've learned all about the Beis HaMoked and the 4 rooms of the Beis HaMoked, you're going to really enjoy this video because you're going to know everything that the narrator is talking about. And let's take a look now at the DaAs Tevunos. And we are on page Zayin Ches, on page Ches of the DaAs Tevunos. And the Ramchal was explaining to us that, again, the DaAs Tevunos is a dialogue between the Neshama and the Seichel. And the Neshama says, I believe as articles of faith the 13 Animamins. 9 of them I understand, 4 I don't, but I accept them as Torah Misinai. It's an absolute belief, but I want to understand them logically. Shitas Haramchal, Chovis Halbovas, the Shalom, etc. You need to know these things. You need to understand these things. These things need to be understood, not just believed in. And therefore he says, I don't understand 4 of them. The 4 I don't understand is Hashgacha, that God is actually managing and supervising every microsecond of the world. Doesn't appear that way, chas v'shalom, to the naked eye. Schar v'onesh, reward, punishment, bias Mashiach, and Tchias HaMesim. Those are the 4 things I believe in, but I don't understand. Can you please help? And we went through the Hakdamas about the perfect God created an imperfect world so that we can be partners with him in perfecting the world by making the right choices. And therefore we get reward for making the right choices, and we're not eating Nahama de Kisufa. We're not eating the bread of shame, because that which we're given as reward, we earned. And Ramchal now is talking about God could have created, if he wanted to, a very perfect world. Perfect as he is perfect. But then there will be no place for us. There's no work for us to do. If we're all perfect and the world's perfect, there's nothing for us to do. And therefore, if there's nothing for us to do, there's no schar to give us. If there's no schar to give us, there's no purpose in the world, because God created the world lehativ, to bestow benefit and good. And the only way to do that is for the Ribono Shel Olam to be able to bestow good through our bechib choices. How did God go about creating this perfectly imperfect world? So we touched upon yesterday the Ramchal's concept of tzimtzum. That's what we're going to take a look at today, the concept of tzimtzum. The Ramchal has a double concept of tzimtzum. And first, we mentioned yesterday the common usage of the word tzimtzum means some kind of contraction, some kind of withdrawal. Molech halaretz kevodo. God occupied all the space of the universe, not just this universe. We don't even know what we're talking about. The Milky Way, beyond the Milky Way, completely occupied by God. There was no place, physical place, so to speak, for a universe. So God withdrew, contracted into an area and left an open space. And in that open space, the universe was created. That's how people think, people think of tzimtzum. The Ramchal's concept of tzimtzum is not about space, it's about power. God's kol yachol, God's absolute power, his kol yachol, could have created a perfect world. Boom! Vayomer Elokim yehi olam. God said, let there be a world. God didn't have to go through 6 days, and he didn't have to go through 10 vayomers. There are 9 vayomers, and Bereshis is a mimer. But God didn't need that process. That's the discussion Bli Neder will have about Hadroga. We live in a world called the world of process. Everything is a process. The world wasn't created, boom. God could have said, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Olam, and there would have been monkeys and humans and cockroaches and trees and tulips and roses and fish. Everything could have come from Yehi Olam. God didn't want to do it that way. He wanted a world that was created Bahadroga, in steps. We'll see why when we go further into the DaAs. But for the Ribono Shel Olam to create the world Bahadroga, meaning in steps, there was a tzimtzum. That tzimtzum means that God restrained, self-restrained, so to speak. He restrained his kol yachol. He restrained his full immense power, which we have no idea what that is. And he created a world on something less than his full power. And how did he do that? He did that with a name called Shaddai. The word Shaddai comes from dai, enough, dayenu, enough. Every time God created something and he decided that that was enough for the needs of creation, he said dai. So when there was a certain amount of species of fish, there could have been more fish coming. God didn't lose his imaginative abilities. If there are 10 million species of fish, there could have been 11 million species of fish, because you can have a fish with one fin, a fish with 3 fins, a fish pink and purple, a fish with 1 eye, a fish with 3 eyes. It's no end to it. So why did we have only the number of fish that we have in the world? Because God created the fish, and when a certain number of fish came to the world that God knew, and God decided, this is enough fish for the bria that I'm creating, he said, die, that's it, no more fish. And when the rakia, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia, the firmament, the sky was unfolding, it kept on unfolding. And unless God said die, the clouds, the sky would still be unfolding today, because God's eternal. What he says is eternal, it's infinite. So if God says Yehi Rakia, it would have infinitely be unwound into more and more sky. And we will be seeing that today. Let there be Yishitzu Hamayim Sheretz Nefesh. The Ribono Shel Olam said fish, birds. We would still see new species of birds coming out of the water or the mud, the rakak, whatever it came from. We'd still see new species coming out, because God said there should be birds. There'll be more and more birds coming, because God is infinite. And there's an infinite variety of birds. You can have a bird with 3 feet, a bird with 1 foot, a bird with different colors, a bird with polka dots, a big one, a small one. There's infinite variety, and God could have created infinity. He is infinity. So why do we only have a certain amount of species of birds? Because at some point, the Ribono Shel Olam said, die. That's as many species as we need in this world. That's a tzimtzum. That's a restraint. God did not create the world in kol yachol, in his infinite ability. So he took infinity and made it finity, finitude. He took infinity, his kol yachol, and made it finite. That's a tzimtzum. That's tzimtzum 1. And now we're on page ches. V'chan nechlelas yediah acheres. V'hi ma she'amru zal, the Gemara says, Shaddai, she'amar l'olam adai. God said enough. Shehashamayim hayim nimtachem v'holchem ad shegor bahem kamo shekosev b'medrash. The rakia kept on unfolding. It was going and going and going until God said die. That's what the Gemara says. V'hainu, the Ramchal says, Kivader hayochel livra yosef brias mimasha brora. God could have created more creatures than he created. V'abrias atzum yosef gedol mimasha brora. And he could have made a bigger creature. God could have made an elephant that's 10 times bigger than the elephants we see. He could have done anything. V'im hoya roitza livra brios l'fierach hapoel l'hoya lehem shir. If God wanted to create a world that was a complete mirror image of his perfection and his level and quality of infinity, he could have done that. But that would have been now a creation on his level. The person that's making, it would have been the level of the creator. and the level of the creator is infinity, and creation would have been infinity. You still would have seen new animals coming out of the ground today. God did not create the world on his level of infinity and perfection. He created the world as a finite world on the level of an imperfection, according to our needs. What will the human being need in this world? X amount of fish, and X amount of birds, and X amount of trees, and X amount of types of flowers. It's all created for man. It's all created for the use of man in one way or another. So what was created is a perfectly imperfect world to help a perfectly imperfect human being perfect himself in that perfectly imperfect world. So it's Lefi Erech HaNif'al. The world was created according to my needs and according to what I'm going to have to use in this world, not according to what the creator could have done. The creator could have done infinity perfect, but he didn't create a world on his level. He created the perfectly imperfect, finite world on my level, the Erech HaNif'al. Dahainu sheshir b'hem hamida v'hatchuna hana'osa b'hem lefi ha'mechuvim b'hem. Everything was done in a measurement, in an amount, to the extent necessary for the purpose of creation, not the purpose of the creator. The creator doesn't need any of these things. All these things are created for the perfectly imperfect human being to help perfect himself. V'nimtza, therefore, she'al kol ponim ikev kaviyachol yacholta harbe ubilti balas tachas. Therefore, the Ribono Shel Olam self-restrained himself and didn't create a creation that is infinite and perfect. He restrained himself and didn't use his full power, and that's called a tzimtzum. Shelo tifal b'briyosef kamo erka, v'lo sifal elefi erech habriyos ha'ela hanef'olos mimena. Chav Zayin, this is the Seichel explained tzimtzum. We're going to see in a moment Rav Friedlander's footnote, because there are two tzimtzums. Ramchal has a double tzimtzum, and they both deal with God's restraining his kol yachol, his ultimate power. It's a restraint. It has nothing to do with withdrawing and contracting into a space. It's not a space concept, the tzimtzum, for us right now. The tzimtzum is a concept of power, restraining power. So the Neshama says back to the Seichel, paragraph Chav Zayin, Kol zeh muchrach vadai. This is absolute truth. It's absolutely, it's self-evident. Kimin ha'amunahu, one of the basic principles of our belief, sha'alakai yisbarach shemahu kol yachol b'chol panim. We believe that Ribono Shel Olam is absolutely perfect, perfect in power, perfect in chachma, perfect in everything. He's infinite. And he could have made a more perfect world. That's simply basic 1 and 1 equals 2 emunah. God is absolutely perfect, and he could have created a perfect world. It is impossible to put any measurements on his ability. Now, I want to mention something here that's going to come up later in the Sefer, and that's called the yichud. We are not permitted to talk about anything about the essence of God, zero. For example, we talk about God's wisdom. How are you going to describe God's wisdom? Oh, God is 100,000 Einsteins. No, you don't like that one? Okay. God is 250,000 Rabbi Akiva Egers. Oh, you don't like that one? God is 1 million Moshe Rabbeinus. You don't like that one? Well, how smart is God? Tell me, how smart is he? He's 1,000,000 times smarter than Moshe. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to talk about what God is. How powerful is God? His Gevura. Oh, 1,000,000 nuclear bombs. You don't want to say such a thing. You don't like that one? Okay. He's 2 million times more powerful than all the weapons in the world as we know it today. You don't like that one? Well, how are you going to describe God's Gevurah? You can't describe God at all, because if you begin describing him, then you're going to detract from his greatness, and you're not allowed to talk about what he is. Mi yamalal gevuras Hashem yashmiya kol tilosai, the Gemara says. Just silence. The fact that we say in Shemona Esrei, Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibor, Vahanora, we say God's a Gibor, he's a Nora, he's Godol. We're not allowed to say that in Shemona Esrei. We're not allowed to describe God's Godol, Gibor, Nora. So how do we have permission to say those three words? The Gemara in Bracha says, because in the Torah, in Chumash Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Godol, Gibor, Nora. So because Moshe Rabbeinu taught us that we're allowed to say Godel, Gibor, and Nora, we therefore are permitted to say in Shemona Esrei, Godel, Gibor, and Nora. Other than that, if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say that, we couldn't say those words either. We don't know what we're even talking about. He's a Gibor. What does a Gibor mean? What does it mean? No matter what you're going to say, you're going to be short of God's Gibor. And therefore, you're not allowed to talk about it. The only thing you're allowed to talk about is Yichud. And that's going to become one of the principles of the whole Ramchal's writings and the principles that he's going to develop later in the Sefer. Yichud means unique. Unique is just a blanket cover for everything else. God's Chokhmah is unique. There's no one like him. You want to tell me what his Chokhmah is? I can't, because it's so unique. I can't describe it. Tell me about God's Gevurah. I can't, because it's so unique that it can't be described. Well, tell me something about the Gevurah. I can't, because it's Yichud. That we're allowed to talk about. God's Yichud HaChokhmah. God's Yichud HaGevurah. He's Echad, Yochid, Umiyuchad. We cannot talk about it. That we're allowed to talk about. We're allowed to talk about God is so unique, I can't even talk about him. I can't describe anything about him. So when God created the world, he created a world for us so that we would have what we need in this world to avoid bad choices. There's all kinds of stuff out there that we need to avoid, and things out there to help us make the good choices. And through that, we're able to perfect the imperfect world. The perfectly imperfect world was created with the exact number of things, the exact number of species, the exact number of flowers, the exact number of types of trees, the exact number of fruits, the exact number of vegetables that mankind that Jews are either supposed to eat, not eat, things we can do, things we can't do, perfectly imperfect world. And therefore it's on the level of the human being. God looked at the human being and said, what will this human being need? God didn't say, I'm going to create a world in my image, a perfectly infinite world. It's not lefi erech hapoel. It's not according to the needs or the level of the creator. It's lefi erech hanifal. It's according to the needs and the level of the created. It's on our level. Everything that we see that was created with a certain measurement and a certain and limitations, that's not on the level of God, chas v'sholom. It's what his will decreed to be created for our needs. Let's take a quick look to begin today, at least a discussion of double tzimtzum. And that's Rav Friedlander's note 6 at the bottom of page Ches. Muzbarim kan shnei gedorim shel tzimtzum. The Ramchal here is explaining two different concepts in tzimtzum. Shemuskarim b'klolim rishonim u'mufarotim yosel ahalam b'simin yud beis nun beis ayin sham b'yunim 15. Hageder echad. One concept of tzimtzum shelo bora es habrios lefi erech hapol fi mashoiro l'Hashem yisborach lifol. Ki oz lahoylem gvul v'shir el lebroim lefi erech hanifol lefi haroy lenevroy. That's the tzimtzum we just talked about. The Rebbeinu Shalom created a limited world. It's not infinite. It all comes to an end. Everything eventually comes to an end here. It's not infinite, and it's not perfect. He created it on our level and not on his level. Therefore, he restrained his power and created an imperfect. The perfect God restrained his perfection and created a perfectly imperfect world. That's Tzimtzum 1. V'zui hayadiyah ha'acheres shenechleles b'chan, shemitzad ma'aseh HaKadosh Baruch Hu ha'isa bria mispashetes le'in shir, ela sha'Kadosh Baruch Hu garbo, dainu ikiv osam milispashet b'ligabo. That's the world, that's a Tzimtzum of Shaddai. Die, enough. The Rebbeinu Shalom could have let the sky continue to unfold and more animals come out of the ground. God said, die, that's it. It's not going to be infinite and it's not going to be perfect. It's die, that's it. Stop. That's the first Tzimtzum. The second Tzimtzum, Hageder Ha'acher, Huz Bola'el, Shlo Brora Es Habrios Mitchila Shleimim B'Shleimus Gemura, V'af Lo Flo Lefi Erech HaNevroim, Elabrom Chasevim, Gedeis Loses Lemefshoris Lavoda Shashlimus Atman. Tzimtzum 2. Now that God created this perfectly imperfect world, okay, we're now in the world. We're the Lublings, we're the Zoom people, we're mankind. Even on the level of man, which is not Kol Yochel, it's not God's perfect creation, but God could have made a perfect human being. In other words, the human being himself wouldn't have God's perfection, but on the level of a human being, we go down many levels. We say human being. How about the human being being perfect, God? God, we know that you are the absolute in perfection, and you didn't create the world in your image of perfection. Because no one's going to reach that level ever. And no one can even understand what your level of infinity and perfection is. We know that. But on the low level of the creation, God could still have created the perfect human being on the level of human being. In other words, there are two definitions. There's God, perfection. Tzimtzum 1. God said, I'm not creating the perfect world that's a complete reflection of me. I'm going to create a perfectly imperfect world. Now there's a second level of perfection. It's not God perfection, it's human perfection. God could have created a perfectly perfect human being on the human level. God still didn't do that. On the second level of the definition, man on a human level is an imperfect human being. So that's the second Tzimtzum. And that human being was created imperfect even on the level of a human being, so that human being can perfect himself, going back to the beginning of the Sefer, can perfect himself. And through that, he's going to be able to get schar. The Rebbeinu Shalom can give the person schar for something he earned through his own work because he perfected himself and perfected the world. And now the human being not only has schar, but he has emotional simcha that he earned that which he got. So for the Ramchal, there are two Gedorim in Tzimtzum. First, the Rebbeinu Shalom willed that the world will be created not on his level of perfection, not Kol Yochel. It's going to be an imperfect Bria, low level. Now, even on that low level, you can still have perfection on the new. In other words, you create a new definition. It's not going to be God perfect, but it could be human perfect. But God said, no, the human being's not going to be perfect even on the human level. And he's going to have a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Toiv, and he's going to have Chesroinus, and he's going to be able to be kind of Shleimus, all so that the Rebbeinu Shalom could be mative, give us good, give us reward, because that's the goal of the world for our purposes right now. As he mentioned at the beginning of Sefer, Hatova. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants to be mative. And everything that happens in the world, in one way or another, we understand it sometimes, we don't understand it sometimes. The whole goal is to be mative. The whole goal is to be mative. And this is a perfectly imperfect world on the level of the human being. We don't talk about God. We don't know about God's essence. We don't know what he is. We don't know anything about him. We don't know what is Godel, what is Gibor, what is Chochmah. We don't know these things because that's perfectly perfect. We don't know what that is. It's infinity. We don't know what that is. And God created a world that was that was finite and not perfect. Tzimtzum 1. And in that finite world, God could have still made the perfect human being on the level of a human definition of perfection. He didn't do that either, to give us a place to perfect ourselves and get schar. So those are the two levels of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum one is God did not use his kol yochel to create the world. And even when he didn't use his kol yochel to create the world, he still could have used his koches to create the perfect human being on the level of human being. He didn't do that either. That's the second tzimtzum, and that's the world we live in for the Ramchal. Tzimtzum one, tzimtzum two. Bottom line is we're perfectly imperfect, and it's a wonderful thing to be perfectly imperfect because that gives us a lot of work to do in our lifetime. And through that work in our lifetime, we're able to be Kona Shlemus, and be Kona Shlemus, we get that card that allows us into Olam Haba to ultimately be Nena Misiv Hashchina. But everything is for the Hatova. Everything is God's created and God's creation. Everything that happens in creation is L'toiv. And again, I mentioned yesterday, this is a sefer of logic. We're not talking about Gamzu L'toiv. Otherwise, we don't need to learn DaAs Tevunos. If someone says, Nebuch, the following happened to me, and you say, don't worry about it, Gamzu L'toiv, you're talking to his emunah. You're saying, have faith in God. It's all for the good. This sefer opened up by a neshama that says, I have my faith already. I believe in all these things. But can you explain to me in a rational way how these things work? So we're creating now an introduction of building blocks in the DaAs Tevunos so that eventually we'll be able to understand when things happen in the world, we're going to understand why they happen, that it's l'toiv. Not, in other words, this sefer is not triggering your emunah. Something happens, you say, don't worry, gamzu l'toiv, alts for the goods, don't worry about it. That's talking to a person's emunah. This sefer is talking to a person's seichel. It's the neshama and the seichel. The neshama says, I want to understand this. I already believe in the gamzu l'toiv. Can you explain it to me so I understand it? And right now, what we're doing the DaAs Tevunos and what we've been doing till now is literally just foundational blocks for the concepts that are going to come later. Maybe tomorrow during the DaAs Tevunos, we'll summarize what we've done so far in terms of these foundational concepts before we go any further. And in that context, we may take a look tomorrow at a piece of Rav Kook on this whole concept of man was put in this world to perfect himself and perfect the world. There's a beautiful piece of Rav Kook about that that has to do with Havdalah, Motzei Shabbos. So perhaps tomorrow, DaAs Tevunos, rather than going further, we'll review quickly the foundational principles we've done already and take a look at the Rav Kook. We'll continue in Masechta Middos B'li Neder. Tomorrow morning is Tuesday morning. We will be B'li Neder restarting the shir in Yeshaya, which we've been doing for many years. It's been a women's shir, we're learning Yeshaya. Of course, the men can join them if they like, 9 o'clock. We're at the end of the 10th parak of Yeshaya, and we're going to go into the 11th parak of Yeshaya. And that's the prophecy of Yeshaya of Yecheskel Hanavi. I'm sorry, of Yeshaya Hanavi. It's the prophecy of Melech HaMashiach Meher V'Yameinu. Those Jews that need a refuah shalema should have a refuah shalema. Those Jews that need nechama should have nechama. Those Jews who need Yeshua should have Yeshuas. The Rabbanu Shalom should help us to understand there's something happening all around the world, something happening here in Eretz Yisrael. And it's not the healthiest spiritual thing in the world. And I spoke about this, I think, in my first shir, when this thing, my first Zoom shir, when this thing started. People are getting into, how do we say that? They're getting back into life. We're going back in the streets. We're going back to the stores. We're going back. We're going back. We're going back. We're going to go back to the parks. We're going to go back to the zimmers. We're going to go back to the hotels. We're going to go back to the shuls. We're going to go back to the base measures. We're going to go back and back and back and back and back. We're going to all go in reverse. We don't want to go back in reverse. If we end up post this corona, and Baruch Hashem, tremendous strides have been made forward in healing this horrible disease. And we're making great strides, but Israel Hashem, and we'll continue to make great strides. If we don't change our lives post-corona, and we just go back to the stores and back to the malls and back to the hotels and back to the zimmers, then we put our life in reverse. Now, sometimes you need to go in reverse, but you can't drive on a highway in reverse. It's not safe and it's not normal. Something has to have happened to our lives that puts us in forward gear. What am I going to take from this corona? What am I going to take from the fact that God made us lock ourselves away through Pesach? What am I going to take from the fact that I have to wear masks? What am I going to take away from all Nebuch, the people that died, the Yisayim, the Almonas? What am I taking away from this? I'm going to jump out of my house and sing and dance that it's over, and then go back to the hotels and back to the malls and back and back and back and back. What are you going to do to move forward post-corona? And our tefillos have to change. At the very least, our tefillos have to change. At the very least, our ambitions have to change. Our she'ifas, our chukas have to change. What we're looking forward to is, I'm looking forward to that 1 week in Tzfas at that simmer. Every year I go to that simmer in Tzfas. I'm looking forward already. I can't. I'm looking so forward to my week in Tzfas. I'm waiting for that week at the Kinar. I'm waiting already. We have to start waiting for bigger things. Post-corona, we need to change what we're waiting for. Of course, we all need vacations. We all need to get out. We've been locked up for a long time. And again, you need to be careful where you go, when you go. Even if the government says you can go to a hotel, the government not saying go to the hotel, we'll pay for it. For the government to pay for your hotel, God forbid, you need the corona. If you don't have corona, you have to go to the hotel and pay for it yourself. So the government may say to you, you can go to a hotel, but think about whether it's the right time to go to the hotel. Is it safe to go to the hotel? How old are you, et cetera, et cetera. Don't just go run out because the government says it's okay. But beyond that, what we're waiting to do, fill in the blank. What are you waiting to do now that Baruch Hashem, we're getting over this slowly? What are you waiting to do? What's the big thing on your list? I'm waiting to, I can go to Ramon. I've been waiting to go to Ramon. I've been waiting to go here. I've been waiting to go there. We have to have a new list in our head. We have to have a new 8.5 by 11 in our minds. The first thing on top of the list is I'm davening now, I want to go forward. I'm davening now with a new kavana for the Beis Hamikdash. I'm davening now with a new kavana for Mashiach. I want to move forward. I don't want to go backwards anymore to where the world was. I didn't like that world. I got used to it, but it wasn't a normal world. People get used to not normal things and then they think it's normal. It's not normal. There's a famous story that Rav Zevin brings down in his Sefer. It's about a king and a minister. And for some reason, this kingdom, everyone's going insane. People are just going insane. Every day more people are walking around the streets doing crazy things. The whole Maluch has gone insane. And the king asks this minister, we'll call him the health minister. He asks the health minister to go out and check what's going on. Why is everybody going crazy in the streets? The minister does his research, and it turns out that the water in this kingdom is contaminated. It's polluted, and it causes people to lose their minds. So the king says to the minister, this is a tremendous find. I understand. But now we have a little problem. I've been drinking private water in the palace, and you've been drinking private water in the palace. But eventually that private water is going to run out. We're going to have to drink the same water that everyone else is drinking. And we're going to also, the two of us are going to go crazy too. Then what? Then I'm crazy as the king and you're crazy as the minister. Then what do we do? So the minister said, I have an idea. When we have to start drinking the water that everyone else is drinking, I'm going to put an X on your forehead and you're going to put an X on my forehead. So the king said to the minister, what is that going to help, an X on the forehead? So the minister said, it's going to help as follows. everyone out there is crazy, but they're all crazy. And because they're all crazy, they think they're all normal because everybody's doing crazy stuff and the crazy things have become normal. So it's become normalized. The two of us are going to have an X on our heads, and that X is going to remind us that we're crazy, that we're not normal. And it's always better to know that you're crazy and know you're crazy than be crazy and think you're normal. So that's going to be the king and the minister. At least we'll know we're crazy and we're not going to normalize craziness, whereas everyone else out there is making a new norm, which is called crazy. The old world was normal crazy. We got used to all kinds of craziness in that world. Well, it wasn't normal. We just got used to sickness. And now there's a period now that there was a purification period. Stay home, think, don't go out into that world. Think through what world you want. Think through what you're waiting for. Think through what your ambitions are. Think through what your goals are, and think. So before we run out into the streets because we've been waiting to do X, Y, Z, think about what you're really waiting for. What is the big thing that you're waiting for? And our tefillahs need to be turned to the Ribono Shel Olam. We got a message here. We got a message. What we wait for and what we strive for, what our ambitions for have changed. We don't want the old world ambitions. We want the ambitions. We want a Beis Hamikdash. We want to go up to the Shar HaMizrach, the Shar Shushan Habira. We want to walk through the Shar Shushan Habira. We want to walk through the Chayil. We want to walk through the Ezras Noshim. We want to go up to the Shar Nikanor. We want to offer a korban Toda in the Beis Hamikdash from Herv Yameinu. And this is very important before all the Hora'ot go off and everyone's running out into the streets. You can do whatever you want. And the masks come off and the gloves come off. You know? Straighten out, everybody straighten out, present company included, everybody straighten out your minds for what it is we truly are waiting for. What's the number one thing on our list that we're waiting for? And everything else comes after that. There are a lot of things we need and we're waiting for. But what's the ultimate number one desire of a Yid right now? Ribono Shel Olam, we're waiting for you to bring your Shechina back down to the Beis Hamikdash that we are building through our efforts in learning Masechta Middos. Everyone have a wonderful, healthy, safe day. Take care of yourselves. Make the right decisions where you go, when you go, how you go. Continue to take care of yourselves. It's very important. People out there are doing all kinds of things as if this thing never happened. Take care of yourselves. Everybody have a wonderful day. Look out for the link from Shmuel. It'll be the virtual tour of the Beis Hamikdash. You will really enjoy it now that we've done a good portion of the first perek of Middos. Everybody have a wonderful day.